So one of the biggest complaints people have with Grayzone Warfare is obviously the performance issues. When I first loaded into the game, I was averaging around 40 FPS, and after some tweaking and fine tuning of the graphics settings, I'm now sitting anywhere from 80 to 120 FPS depending on what area of the map I'm on. So I figured I'd share my graphics settings with you guys and hopefully be able to help some of you get your game running a lot better. Alright, so jumping right into this, as you guys can see in the top right hand corner of the screen, my FPS is averaging a little bit over 100 right now. I had to come into a shady area so you can see, but if we walk around, if we look at different places on the map, it's going to jump up and down a lot. That's just the downside of the game being in early access. That's why I say I average anywhere between 80 and 120 FPS, but it does jump below and above that. It's very unstable right now. It's unfortunate, but this is the best we got and we just kind of got to deal with it right now. So basically all I'm going to do is go through my graphics settings and show you guys what I have, so hopefully it'll help some of you get a little bit better frame rate. For context here, I do have a 3080 Ti and a Ryzen 5900X 12 gig graphics card and 12 core processor, so just keep in mind that unfortunately this game does kind of require some good hardware to play. So if you have an older PC build and some lower end parts, you're probably not going to be able to play this game very well. So if you're on the fence about buying Grayzone and you have an older PC, I would just wait a while until the game is better optimized. All right, so jumping over to the graphics tab, one thing that I like is when you make a change, you can see it in the game. So if you see right here, when we change shadow quality, you can see the mountain changing a little bit. We're going to go from top to bottom and I'm going to go through everything with you guys so you can see how I'm getting decent frames. So up top, obviously you're going to want to make sure you're on the correct monitor. If you're not, then you're going to have some issues. Window mode, you're going to want to make sure this is full screen and full screen only. If you're in windowed or windowed full screen, you're not going to be able to maximize FPS. I don't know the science behind all of this. I'm just telling you guys what works for me. Obviously, make sure your display resolution is matched to whatever your monitor is. And then we've got some settings down here that are kind of just personal preference. I've got my FOV set to 65, VSync is off, and then all of these I haven't touched. Frame rate limit, I've got mine set to unlimited, but feel free to play around with this and maybe you can match it to your monitor's refresh rate. And then frame rate limit in the background, this is going to be like when you alt tab. I have this set to 30, which is I believe the lowest it is. I have this set to 30 because when I alt tab, I don't want this game running at 100 frames per second for no reason when I'm not even in the game. So I've just got mine set to 30. All right, so moving into the quality section of the graphics, basically I'm gonna have everything set to low except for shadow qualities. We kind of went through this a second ago, but if you look at the mountain right here, when you drop this down to low, it makes the mountain a little bit darker. And when you go up to high, it brightens it up a little bit, which is going to be a little bit easier to see other players if you're out in the world. I've played around with this. I don't really see a huge difference in quality or performance, whether this is on high or low. So I'd rather set mine to high and be able to see a little bit better. But again, everything else, global illumination, texture resolution, effects quality, reflections quality, foliage quality, I have everything set to low. Obviously, you can play around with this stuff, and as you can see in the background, like let's look at this bush right here. We change this from low to medium and then from medium to high, and it's going to change a little bit. But for me personally, this game, I just need the most amount of frames as possible because it all matters when you're out in the world. So I've got everything set to low except for shadow qualities. I know sometimes using a little bit higher texture resolution will actually give you more frames depending on your hardware. In a game like Escape from Tarkov, if I'm at low on texture resolution, I get less frames than I would if I was on medium, but I'm currently on low. This is what works for me and I haven't really changed it since. Now moving down into post-processing, I don't think I've really messed with anything here too much other than sharpening. Obviously you're going to want to turn motion blur off because who needs motion blur, I guess, unless you're making like a cinematic video or something. I do have my sharpening turned up to about 30. You could do whatever you want with this. Obviously you can see it in the background. The higher you go, the more sharp it is. I've found that 30 works pretty good for me. Post-processing I have set to low, and a quick little tip, whatever you hover over down here in the bottom, it is going to tell you exactly what it does. So if you're unsure about something, just hover over it and it will tell you down below. Colorblind mode I have off. I think if you change this, it's just basically going to change how everything looks in the world. I don't know if this is going to have an effect on performance, but I think the game looks great as it is, so I just leave that off. If you have it on, you can change the colorblind mode strength right here, so whatever you want it to be. So let's say we've got it at 10 and we want to use this one. We can hit this and we can change how vibrant it is, but I just leave mine off. Now, moving down to the advanced portion, this is going to be the most important thing that you're going to do. A lot of you, when you get into the game for the first time, are going to have extremely low frame rates, and it's all going to depend on what kind of hardware you have. So basically, if you have a NVIDIA 3000 series or below, you're going to want to set anti-aliasing to FSR. This is basically going to double your frame rate almost immediately. I know it did for me. First time I got in the game, I was at like 40 frames. And then when I walked out of base, it dropped all the way down to like 10. It was awful, terrible. Did some research, found out that if you set this to FSR, it is going to help a lot. If you have an NVIDIA 4000 series card, everybody is saying you're going to want to use DLSS, but I can't confirm if this works. You're just going to have to go off of what other people are saying, honestly, but they say if you have a 4000 card, set it to DLSS. Now, obviously, if I apply this and go back out using my 3080 Ti, you can see we've dropped all the way down to like 50 to 70, so DLSS just does not work for me. We go back in here, change this to FSR, apply the changes, and we go back. You can see we're over 100. So this is going to be the biggest thing. You guys want to make sure that when you get into the game, make sure this is set to FSR. I'm pretty sure the devs did a hot fix to where they made it FSR by default, but if you're getting low frames, double check this and make sure this is on. One thing that kind of goes along with that is going to be the fidelity frame generation. You want to make sure this is on as well. And then I have NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency on also. I haven't tested this with it off, but the game runs pretty good for me, so I haven't really messed with any settings. And then the last thing that is important is going to be your Fidelity FX Super Resolution. I use native AA. A lot of people say use quality or balance, but when I switch over to balance, obviously I still have a decent frame rate, but everything looks really, really grainy. I don't know if you guys can tell over here on YouTube, but when I look at this wall right here, it's just very grainy. And when I move back and forth, it doesn't look very good. And then I've also tested it as well on quality, and I still get that graininess, and it just doesn't look very good when I'm moving around. The tip of my gun just looks very, very bad and very rough. But when I switch over to native AA, everything looks super crisp, smooth. Obviously not perfect, but that is just what works for me. So I would say as long as you have all of these other settings right, play around with the super resolution and just figure out what works best for you. I would personally prefer frames over quality, but there is a fine line that I like to ride, and I want to make sure I have the best quality possible with the most amount of frames possible. All right, so that's going to do it. That is my settings. Hopefully this video helps some of you guys out. I know there's a ton of settings videos on YouTube, but I figured if somebody had similar PC specs to me, they could just copy my settings and maybe it would work good for them. If you're copying somebody else's settings that has a completely different graphics card or CPU or whatever from you, it might not work as well for you. But if you have similar specs to me, maybe this will help you out. Anyways, I hope you guys are having an absolute blast in Grayzone. I know me personally, I am loving this game, and I really hope these settings help you guys out. But other than that, I'll see you in the next video.